Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zoom into Wine. It's time for the show and your host, Ian Blackburn.
Good evening. Just want to thank you guys for joining me tonight. This is our first Zoom of 2022. Hard to believe. We made it this far. And tonight we're going to taste a little bit of dessert wine. You know, a dessert wine is a wine that may fall out of fashion, but I've thought for years that potentially it has kind of hit rock bottom. I'm not sure I've been correct yet. It may still be falling. But I'm going to change my virtual background so I can not look like falling from outer space, but I kind of look that way anyway today. I'm sorry about that. My name's Ian Blackburn, and I run a wine education program here called Learn About Wine, and I'm the wine buyer for merchantofwine.com. And we've been doing Zooms now since the beginning of the pandemic, and it seems to be a pretty safe place to get together. And I've enjoyed being able to send wine all over the country so that we can all taste it together and get some different experts on the Zooms and talk about different things, answer different questions. That's kind of what Zoom into Wine is all about. We have a calendar of Zooms that we produce. We're keeping that calendar pretty robust right now. It's every Wednesday, and once a month we have a very fun event that pulls together like 5 or 6 different wineries, and we've produced an entire annual calendar of stars events now. And we're in the process of really putting the best foot forward for wine into those tastings, meaning we're getting great wines on the Stars into Wine series, which is one of the Wednesdays every month. We're also just right now in a little bit of a drive for membership because it's a good time of the year to join our annual Zoom into Wine membership. Which basically gives you a Zoom link every week to each and every one of our Zooms, as well as a discount code for every single week where we buy, we have the wines available, you get a discount code. There's an additional, bribe, gift, whatever you want to call it. The membership's $100, so we're going to send you a $100 bottle of California Cabernet as a gift to say thank you. Courtesy of our event that we did called Stars of Cabernet, and we had some awesome wines in that lineup, so can't disclose which one we're going to give you, but we promise it's going to be a great bottle of Cabernet. So it's really a program that kind of just generates enough audience to join us each week to make it worth it to make these videos happen. We also have a Zoom to Wine library of every Zoom we've ever done. If you go to the Merchant of Wine website down at the bottom, you'll see the Zoom into Wine archive. And I have a team that takes these videos and chops them up and cleans them up a little bit. We also post a lot of these videos as content on the actual wines that we offer. Interview with a winemaker or a little bit about the subject matter. So if you buy a bottle of wine, you not only have little video content that you can go back to learn more about that bottle, or maybe just meet the winemaker, things like that. So I hope the Zoom into Wines serve you well. I enjoy it because it's kind of like a knife sharpener for me, kind of keeping my wine knowledge. I must say that tonight I've got a little an expert friend on the Zoom with me, kind of as my my lifeline in case I have a little question or need a little feedback. John Baccio, who's done a lot of Zooms with us in the past. Hey, John, good to see you. John is back there to help me out throughout the Zoom today as we cover a lot of content. We're going to be tasting 5 different dessert wines. I started with dessert wine this year because I've decided that on our website at Merchant of Wine, there's a couple of categories that I just want to crush it. And this year I want to make our dessert wine selection one of the best on the planet. And I'm going to keep trying to find the best versions. I don't have to have every dessert wine made. I just want to find really great versions. Maybe they're great because they're a great value, or maybe they're great because they truly are the leader in the category. And those are kind of what I'm going to be focusing on. And I imagine having about 50 different dessert wines on the website by the end of this year. And would love to have any questions. We have a nice little chat box for those that subscribed here. If you ask a question on the chat, we will answer it as quickly as possible. If you're watching on Facebook, you can put a question on the Facebook page, and we'll probably be tending that in the next day or so as we discover your messages there. But we're also going to be doing a number of Zooms this year where it is free to sign up for the Zoom. Of course, if you want to get the wine kit delivered, that'll be a different option. We're not able to do that for every single Zoom, but a number of different ones. So if you're out of the market, out of the area, just want to learn about the wines, just want to hear the conversation, we'd love to have a nice large audience. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We have a really nice group. And I realize that our ability to Zoom is maybe being pushed a little hard. You know, you're doing it at work, you're doing it with friends, family, Zoom Christmas, whatever you did. But, you know, again, this is really proven to be the best way for us to get together. It is a little bit hectic out there. As an event producer, the most expensive event I can produce is the one I have to cancel. So it's really great not to have to cancel Zooms, but to be able to get together because, you know, health is absolutely what we've got to keep here. And we can get these wines delivered to you in a safe and healthy way. So we thank you for joining us. Let's get started with our presentation. There's 5 wines, and often for the Zooms like this, when we do our stars events, we put a little bit more juice in the engine, and we put really nice labels on the jars. That just takes a lot of work. So we just put a number 1 on the jar today. And so we're going to start off with a Sauterne, and get that in your glass. And we'll, John, I wish I would have been able to see you today. I could have gotten a kit for you. But you are such an experienced wine pro. John Baccio is with us today. John has been in the business as long as I have, and that's getting to be known as a long time, John.
I know. I know. Pretty old. What can you do? Yeah. Yeah, dessert wines. They're amazing, and like Ian knows that I have a love for them as well, and I wish more people appreciated them, but I think it's because they're so misunderstood and just haven't really been part of our American cuisine. Our dining culture. So I work with a few restaurants. Yeah, I work with it.
Well, I'm going to blame the fact that there are a lot of bad dessert wines out there.
That's true too. That's true too. That and usually, unfortunately, the good ones are sometimes a little more expensive. And that's one of the things that sometimes prevents people from trying lots of different things. Also, you only drink a little bit at a time, of many of them. So that's the other thing. So there are a few things working against them, but I love them, and even being out and about in Los Angeles with the restaurants, I've only got a few great restaurants that work with too many dessert wines, and it's mostly because even if the sommeliers are nerdy and want to push them, they just it takes a certain type of adventurous customer to trust them, and once they do, they find out, like Ian said, that how wonderful they are and what a great end to the meal they can be. So you're all, this is a leg up for all of you, that you get to taste these kinds of things without having to go to some super fancy restaurant and having white tablecloths all over the place and all that sort of thing. So anyway.
And I'm going to point out a couple of features and benefits about each of the wines that we're going to taste tonight. First one tonight, our Sauterne. I'll get right into this is Chateau Suter, but this is the second label of Chateau Suter. Notice it doesn't say Sutero on the label. It says Lions of Sutero. And what the big houses are doing in places like Bordeaux, and this is not new, this is something they've been doing for a while, but it's really pretty ubiquitous, I hope I said that correctly, now, in that they take their best wine and they really only make it their best wine, and then they take the rest of their wine and potentially bottle it in a second wine, or if it's an enormous property, and some of them are quite large, they could actually make 2 or 3 different wines. So they'll have a first quality, a second quality, and maybe a third or fourth quality, and that could achieve different price points. A bottle of Sutero from a great vintage is likely to be north of $100, and we're talking about a half bottle of Sutero from a great vintage. This bottle of Lions, which is from 2015, is less than $30, and so it's a second selection. It is meant to have a little bit more pronounced acidity. It is supposed to be a little softer, a little less dense. The first wine, you'll pay more for it, and you need to wait longer to drink it. When they make the first wines, those really kind of need that 10-year number to get to their best state of mind. Whereas the second label wines, or the second efforts here, are produced in a way, in a format, in a style that are meant to be consumed a little bit sooner. And so that's why 15 is in really good shape. I've recently had some 16s and some 17s, even the great wines from 17s. They're delicious. But when they're young, they do tend to feature the fruitiness of the wine and not as much complexity that comes with age, and really kind of falls into harmony with, the tension of the wine, the concentration of the wine, that sense of place of the wine. All that kind of comes out with time a little bit more. In their youth, they're really about fruit and sugar and primary stuff, just like kids. They're kind of young kids. They're fun, they're pretty, they're cute, they're whatever, but they're not necessarily as wise. And so a wine can get a little wise over its time in the bottle. 2015, however, we're heading into 6+ years old, and there's a natural golden nature to this wine. And cheers, everyone. I'll let you see this wine and toast you at the same time. This has got a little bit of a nice 15 was a very good Bordeaux vintage, but quite honestly, probably the best Sauternes wines don't come in a great Bordeaux vintage. They come in the worst Bordeaux vintages, because the way that this whole wine came to fruition was that the grapes in the southern part of Bordeaux, where this wine comes from, and let me just highlight, and I'm sorry, when you watch, when you do a little PowerPoint on Zoom, it can be a little sensitive and flip back and forth a little bit, sorry about that. But here's where Sauternes is, down here in the southern part of Bordeaux. The town of Bordeaux's here, and you got the great wines like Margaux and Saint-Julien and Pauillac and Saint-Estèphe up here. And it's along this estuary called the Gironde. And the boat's parked in Bordeaux. They load up with wine, and then they go back out to sea. You get a little further south down here, and you got Graves, which is great red and white, and but really far south here, it gets a little bit cooler, and there's this perfect climatic condition that is created as the grapes approach ripeness. It will probably rain, as it does all the time in Bordeaux. It rains, but then what it does is it stays cold. And so you got this cold and these wet grapes, and you wake up in the morning and boom, this basically is an explosion of growth in your grapes because of the sugar, and what you've got is a mold, a rot that is starting to attack the grapes. Now, there are many different types of rot, and I think it's kind of similar to like blue cheese. There's really wonderful things that can happen at this moment, but in wine grapes, if you're lucky to get the noble rot, put a nice name on it, the noble rot, it's called botrytis. And it basically lives off the sugars and the moisture in the grapes, and it creates a wine, creates a grape with incredible sugar content. As the grape shrivels, the nectar remains in the grape, and so you crush these sweetened grapes that have been botricized in the vineyard, and you get this product right here. So here's a look at Suter and many of the great producers, and there's a number of great Sautern producers, but I would put Suter in the top 5. Pretty easy to do that, and so this is a really an important house. And really a well-poised team that helps make and market these wines. They're part of a large group that has a sales force to make sure that Suter and the different chateaus that are part of this group get great distribution. The wine is made from Semillon. Semillon, that's the name of the grape variety. And Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc are the 2 white varieties that are grown in the Sautern area. There's a third that could also be used, a third grape variety. The wine does tend to spend some time in barrel. These wines actually take a long time to finish their fermentation because of the high sugars. You're talking about sugars that range from 100 grams per liter to 200 grams per liter, depending on the vintage, depending on the lot, the vintage, all that stuff. So pretty high residual sugars. This one says 124 grams per liter. So that sounds crazy, and I think a lot of people sit at home and say, wow, I don't want to put that kind of sugar in my body. Well, you're not going to drink an entire liter of wine, and that would, I would hope that you wouldn't drink an entire liter of dessert wine. But, they back the equivalent out, and you're looking at about the same amount of sugar as a Coca-Cola in a glass of wine. This wine, while it does have quite a bit of residual sugar, it is still in liquid form, and that's why the wines are so rich and dense, because of that residual sugar, and can kind of cling to the glass. You get a little time in wood. The greater wines spend longer time in wood, because wood is expensive and time is expensive. So these wines just kind of go into bottle and make something really special, really fun, and really delicious, and a really good value here. I want to hear from you and see if you've been able to try the wine. Teresa, did we get you the wines this time?
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
And did you say a glass is equivalent to a bottle of Coke?
Yeah, a glass of wine, a glass of dessert wine, a small, 3-ounce pour, has about the same equivalent amount of sugar as a bottle of Coca-Cola or can of Coke.
So 3 ounces. So that's 1.5 of these bottles.
Nope.
Nope. What are these? How many ounces are these? No, the little testers.
That jar right there, that's about, you got about 1.5 ounces to 2 ounces in that jar.
So 2 of these would be a bottle of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not talking Coke Zero, but
well, I don't drink Coke at all. So
yeah, But,
So if I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning on a sugar high, I'm going to blame it on you.
yeah, that could happen. But I think sugar highs burn off pretty quick.
I'm just teasing you.
Looks like the Oppenheimers. Did you guys arrive into Mammoth?
Yeah, we're at Mammoth.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're at Mammoth and enjoying the wine. And just wanted to clarify, a liter of the Sauterne is similar in sugar to a liter of Coke.
A bottle of Coke. I think the size that I read was like a can of Coke, which is
Okay.
how much is in a how many liters or ounces are in a can? Is that 16?
12 ounces.
12 ounces.
12 ounces of Coke have 39 grams of sugar.
39 grams. Okay.
So 3 ounces of this has 39 grams of sugar.
3 ounces of this would have. Boy, you're making me do a lot of high math right now. 129 grams divided by, if we're talking about a liter, there's about what is it, 2.2 gallons in a 9-liter case. So I can't even do the math right now. But
Okay.
break it down, it's about the same. It's about the same as a can of Coke.
So we just drink a bottle of Coke.
No. This is much better than Coke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, we
Yes.
can. We can't compare.
Better
This is
flavor.
absolutely delicious.
Hey, John, go for it.
Hey, yeah, I just sort of wanted to say just a couple of things about all this. So when we talk about, remember that measurement is grams per liter, and this is a 375 milliliter. So it would take several of these to get to a liter. So there's a little less, but that's the amount of residual sugar it counts in a liter. So there's that, and then we're dividing it out into the portion size. But I should say that just in general, the thing about any great dessert wine, what makes I think what makes any wine great, no matter what kind of wine it is if it's balanced. And the thing about dessert wine is that it has it's held in tension. That sweetness is always held in tension by something else, and it's generally, in a wine like this, it's acidity. So we have those things that are held in tension, and they keep them at bay. Now, I don't drink a lot of Coca-Cola either, but you can think anything that we like that's pleasant, we have to have something that keeps it in balance. So, for example, if you ever have a Coke that's flat, even if it's the right temperature, it tastes off. It's probably tasting off because those bubbles are actually serving a purpose in that particular product, and there's something going on with that. The people often are afraid of, as Ian said, he's on a crusade for dessert wines. I feel myself in that same camp as well, to try to promote them. We are obsessed with sweet things in our American diet, whether we realize that we are or not. People routinely go to Starbucks and get 5,000 calories of a mocha frappalappa ding dong, whatever it is, and they wonder, what is that? Why? This is a lot. Yeah, it's a lot because you've got your entire caloric intake and sugar intake in one beverage for an entire day. And anyway, so something like this, again, we're looking for it to stay in some kind of some kind of tension with the acidity. And you should think also, I know that we have sort of varying degrees of wine knowledge, or I imagine we do on a call like this, but wines that do you want to talk a little bit? I know you talked a lot, Ian, about botrytis and other things. Do you want to talk about sort of the basic difference? This wine grape, after it's gone through this, is about twice as sweet as the grape that goes into making a regular glass of wine. And that grape is about twice as sweet as what you get, if you buy what we call table grapes at Ralph's or something. If you buy just regular grapes that you eat, that is so in terms of winemaking, when we have a sweet wine, we actually generally have some kind of residual sugar. And we have residual sugar in something like this because that mold, it basically, it's very complicated, but essentially what happens is it concentrates the sugars. And when it concentrates the sugars, the yeast that eats the sugar to make wine, it cannot possibly eat all that yeast. So or all that sugar, sorry. So the yeast can't eat all the sugar, so then we have residual sugar. And in something like...
And oftentimes, John, as the winemaker, what we'll do is we do have a lot of sugar to work with, and so the yeast is doing its job. We'll be measuring how much sugar that yeast is eating, and we may even terminate the yeast's job early. And there's ways we could do that, just so that we keep the wine in balance. How much acid do we have to work with, and how much sugar should we have? And there's ways to calculate that. And a lot of these houses have been doing it so long, they know, hey, we need to have at least this much residual sugar with this type of acid in the wine, because the acid's going to be constant. So that's getting a little more geeky on this than we probably need to, but I just want to make sure we point that out. And it was a great point, John, that we do need to have residual sugar to balance out these acids and to make the wine attractive. I mean, the example I always love to use is like making lemonade, and how much sugar do you add to lemonade to make it taste good? That's a lot of sugar, by the way. And that's exactly the same way we make dessert wine, is we just keep enough of the natural sugars that already occur in the grape through the botrytis in the wine, and to keep it in balance. So with that, I want to make sure everyone got a chance to taste the wine. Any questions about Sauterne before we move on? This is a wine that I would talk about, the smell of honey, the smell of citrus, pear, peach, nectarine, a lot of stone fruits, ripe stone fruits, apricots. And I think this is a fantastic rendition. We just did an event in December called the Stars of France, and we finished our tasting Stars of France with a great Sauterne from another very, very important house. Truthfully, I probably would have used this one if we had enough of it to feature it in that event. But because this was a 15, it's just in a greater state. We went to a 16 from another very good house, but that year is really showing off right now. That one more year in bottle allowed this 15 just to have a little bit more softness, plushness, ripeness. You can really get to that core, those baked apricots and honey and wonderful, delicious, unctuous type of characteristics. And as far as pairing goes, I want to kind of tackle this too. I think a big problem for dessert wine is, when do you have it? And I think a lot of people think about trying to pair it with dessert, when I actually think that dessert wine is dessert all by itself and needs no pairing. But if you want to have food with it, my recommendation is that you pair it with something savory like cheese. That is my favorite way to pair dessert wine. If you tried to pair, let's say, apricot pie or creme brulee, which you can almost smell in this wine, it's almost too much of a good thing. And I learned this the hardest way possible, gang. Elisa, did you get a chance to taste those? Are you tasting with us today?
I had a Sauterne from the tasting left over from France.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then I have some others that
I know I sent you a bunch of wine today. I don't remember sending you a tasting kit, but
no. But then I might go to some Vinsanto or something after.
Oh, all right, cool. I know Setsuko's joining us in Japan. We definitely did not get our tasting to you, but it's good to see you, Setsuko. Thank you for joining us. And Jolie, how are you?
Hey, I'm pretty good. I'm Joelle.
Joelle.
Yeah,
Where are you joining us from, Joelle?
I am in Seaside, California, which is part of the Monterey Peninsula.
Awesome. And we sent you a tasting kit?
Yes, you did.
All right, perfect. Did you enjoy the first wine?
It was good. It was a little sweeter than I was expecting it to be, to be honest with you, even though I knew it was dessert wine and it was going to be sweet. But I knew going in. But yeah, no, it was pretty good, and I'm looking forward to trying the rest of these that you sent me. It's really fascinating. You sent me these things, these little, like, they look like pill bottles or something.
Yeah, we call them little decanters, but they are just a food safe jar. But they've served us very well.
Yeah.
The Bergerons and Guptas are joining us from Orange County. I think you're in Orange County. Yeah? You guys didn't scoot off to Utah, did you? I know you did that once. I can see you there. Good to see you all down there. And I hope you enjoyed the first wine. Thumbs up. All right, cool. Well, we will move into wine number 2. And John, I would love if you see like the opportunity, we're tasting 5 different wines. I honestly used, I went through these wines on opening and tasted them and said, what order should I put them in? Our Sauterne tonight has some of the highest residual sugars of the wines that we're going to be tasting, but it's also one of the lowest in alcohol in the flight. And so with that kind of gave me my guide as to which order to taste them in. But someone could argue with me and tell me I'm wrong, that we should have done something first. And one of the questions I had is our very next wine number 2, which I'm hoping a little bit selfishly that some of you have never tried a Banyuls before. And this is a wine that John imports. So we have him to help me a lot with this wine, because Banyuls is a wine that a lot of people have maybe heard of if you've gone to like a French bistro and you've ordered a chocolate dessert or a dessert with chocolate, and they'll come right out and say this is made for Banyuls. And Banyuls is that was my French accent. The Banyuls wine that we're having today is not your average Banyuls. This is a Grand Cru of Banyuls, vintage 2000, really special wine. And I was really excited to find out that John had a little of this in his portfolio. So we poured it. It's got a little different color and approach here, and we'll power right through, John, into the PowerPoint and learn a little bit about this, and then we'll have you talk about it real quickly. But I just want everybody to get on the same page here. Here's a look at the Banyuls 2000 Grand Cru. The producer, Christian Reynal.
It's the Cave de l'Aberru, and this is their cuvee that they work with. And this comes from a producer that works with many, many, many small vineyards, and this is one of the great vineyards in the region. It's an incredibly hot place in the south of France that Ian's pointing out right now, just on the other side of Spain, as you can see. It's a really a remarkable place. This is one of the first places in France to recognize in France is one of those countries where they have designated regions where certain foods and wines are recognized by the state, so to speak. And this was one of the first places where they did that in France. There are some very early ones. This is one of them, it's another wine that's got quite a bit of residual sugar, but it's made in a totally different style. So, Ian, do you want to talk about I mean, you kind of hinted at it before, but the idea of stopping fermentation, the difference between the last wine and these other wines, so that we call them either fortified or liqueur wines. They have a few different names in nerdy wine circles, but I don't know. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Ian?
We'll get there. Just hold that idea 1 second. because the very next wine that we're going to taste is from this village right up the street here called Rive Salt. And so we're going to be going from Banyuls to Rive Salt, and they're very close to each other. They certainly came from a similar time period in history, and there were reasons. There's always reasons. Why did they make it this way? What happened in the world? And you know, you go back in history, and wine was made. It was sold in. They took the animal's stomach, called a wineskin, and they filled it with wine, or they sold it in an urn or a glass jar with a basket around it, so that you could carry it. Because these high tech, this is like, you know, wine 2.0 was when the bottle was invented. It wasn't until the late 1700s that really, you know, a wine went into a heavy glass bottle. So that's still kind of a new deal. So these wines were kind of made in the beginning of the winemaking time, and this wine got designation as an important wine of France in 1936. The laws kind of finally caught up to kind of bonify the wines and to protect the wines and to protect brand France and brand Banyuls and all the different departments. They gave structure and rules to what can be grown where. And so here we're looking at a wine that is made from Grenache, 50% minimum Grenache. And it's a really unique wine for a lot of reasons. And that's what's going to be different about a lot of the wines that we taste tonight, is how unique they are. There's obviously some similarity. They're all made from grapes, but what type of grape? And then once the grapes are picked, what happens to them? Which we're going to cover in just a second. But the best plots go into this wine, and a great plot in Banyuls has incredible minerality, stoniness. Look at the vineyard here, grown right on a hillside, right off the ocean, extremely steep, extremely rocky, low yields, and these are great sites. They are historical sites, and a lot of them have very old vines. John, anything you can add to the discussion of site here?
Yeah, the soil here, as you said, it's very rocky. It's actually it's this schist soil that's actually quite famous in the wine world. And again, that slope is really important. This is amazing stuff, because it sort of is able to sort of because of the age of the vines. Actually, both of these wines have quite old vines. You know, we sometimes see that on wine labels in we think, oh, old vines. It's like Ian said, you know, when a grapevine is also like a person, not just a wine. The grapevine, as it ages, it gets a little bit more sophisticated. And what happens is the amount of fruit comes down, the yield goes down, but sometimes the qualities go up. But they don't always. You have to have a great vineyard for that to work, and it works in a vineyard like this because, again, of the types of the types of minerals in the soil and the exposure to the sunlight and the shade and all the rest of it. And that's one of the reasons why when in France, what they'll do is they'll recognize certain vineyards, not just the region, but a region, a small vineyard within a region, and they call those Grand Cru. So that's what Ian mentioned before. Mm-hmm. It's a remarkable place that the vines are almost like, you know, clinging to those rocks. When you know, if you ever have a chance to go there, it's pretty amazing stuff. And this is really where Grenache, you know, Grenache is wonderful. It's a great grape, and it has a lot of places that claim to be the place that grows the best Grenache. If you talk to a Spaniard, they'll talk about their Grenache. If you talk to people on the other side of France, the south of France, over closer to Chateau Suter, they talk about their Grenache over there. But in the case of the Languedoc-Roussillon and Bagnoul, this really lays a claim to really some of the great Grenache in the world, and that's what we have here. It ages for you saw those barrels before. This particular cuvee gets it gets like a minimum of 8 years. This particular year it got 9 years in barrels like this, and they're barrels that are not all the way topped up, which is an interesting thing. And you might notice the color of this wine. It's kind of a brownish color, and it smells a little bit different than your average red wine, which is what it started out as. And it's not just.
John, you would actually compliment the wine if you told people this wine smelled like schist.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's actually got, so down there in the south of France, they when they make wines like this, they actually there's a term the term is for the way it smells, and it's a little bit unfortunate because it doesn't really translate into our American culture so easily, but it's rancio, R-A-N-C-I-O. And that's sort of this mysterious kind of term that describes kind of, dried fruit and chocolate and wood and all of these things that kind of come together in this sort of heady kind of mix of mystery. And a lot of it comes from oxidation. And that brown color that you see there, that comes from oxidation. So, most of the time with wine, we don't want any oxidation. There are a few places in the wine world where they do. So there are some parts of France, there are parts of Portugal and Madeira, which we're going to talk about, and then Spain, obviously, and then way up in the north, in the Alps in France, in a region called the Jura, J-U-R-A. Those are places where they talk all about oxidation. They love talking about oxidation. But there are only a handful of places in the world. Most of the time when this happens in a winery, it's a disaster. But when it happens to great effect, like something like this, it just adds just layers and layers and layers of complexity.
I would describe the nose as having kind of a baked chocolate, creamy, maybe that schist notion kind of comes off. It's almost like an iodine kind of a smell. There's all kinds of different ranges here. This wine doesn't, maybe into the slight prune or fig category a little bit, but this wine doesn't have like a huge nose on it. It has a detailed nose, and really kind of draws me in. It makes my mouth water just thinking about it, smelling it. It really gets my saliva gland jamming, and when I smell this wine, it just really takes off. It is also interesting to me, John. This wine is better now that I've opened it for a day, or maybe I'm better than I was yesterday. But
no, this wine, I think this wine definitely benefits from some time out of the, with the bottle open and sitting in the glass like this. It's kind of a wonderful thing. But there's almost nothing you can do to hurt a wine like this. The barrels like this in a winery like this, they would sit in actually a warm part of the winery, which is another thing that you'd never see in most winemaking. A lot of things with sweet wines, it's funny, a lot of the things that make a great sweet wine are the things that you learn in winemaking school to not do. This is one of those wines that sort of benefits from all those things you're not supposed to do. It's interesting to have the second wine afterwards. It's going to be fun to try them. Very, very cool. So
cool. Bergeron's, what'd you think of the Banyuls? Did you like that one? I know we got a couple of French-speaking Bergerons. Can't hear you guys, but I think you guys are trying to communicate, but it's...
Can you guys hear us now?
Maybe?
Yeah? Maybe?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. No, we love it. I think the nose had a nice finesse to it. The body was very modern notes and some nice tawny, some 4-5 wine. This is a real treat. That's just one part of it. It's really good. And the treble chocolate is from the coffee undertones seems to work pretty well with this.
Excellent. Well, you guys did it up. I could see the nice little plate of chocolates that you've got there. I'd love to have this with a salted caramel. Also, the classic dessert is that little donut with the ice cream and the, what is that called? Profiterole? Profiterole? That's the classic Banyuls pairing. I'm not sure how those two came together, but that would be a good story to learn. We'll have to, if anybody's heard that story, or maybe you've been there. Has anybody been there? Been down to Banyuls? John, I've also seen some producers put their Banyuls into glass jars, basically, and they leave them in the sun instead of the oak. And this wine, by the way, the way what John was talking about earlier, and we're now at that point to talk about the difference between this wine and the first wine. Is the first wine that we had, the Sauterne, was really a wine made in the vineyard, where the botrytis did most of the work, amping up the sweetness of the grape. The winemaker picked and made the wine from the nectar through fermentation, natural fermentation, yeast, fermented those sugars up to about 12% alcohol in wine number one, the Sauterne. Wine number two, the grapes, and John, help me, because sometimes they allow the Grenache to ferment naturally for a while before they fortify it. I think it depends on the site and the discovery.
It is this. You're absolutely right. This wine has there are a few things going on, but the basic difference, as you were saying, I don't know if you want to continue that thought about the how they get that sweetness going. Then with this, so they let it go and go up to a certain degree. And then they actually stop the fermentation. So, and they stop the fermentation by adding a neutral grape spirit. So they add basically brandy, they add alcohol. So yeast is also like people. Yeast can't live in an alcoholic an environment that's too high in alcohol, And what happens initially with the yeast is that basically if in a regular wine, it that's 12 or 13% alcohol or something like that, it'll eat and eat and eat, and then there's no more sugar left, and that's it. And it basically falls asleep, and then some of it dies and they filter it out. In something like this, they have to stop the fermentation. They stop the yeast before the wine is finished fermenting. They add some more, so there's still some residual sugar. They add some alcohol. So in France, they call that a vin du naturel, which means wine naturally sweet. But it's confusing because in a way, it's anything but natural, because they're actually doing it to the wine. They're stopping it. What they mean is it's still got the natural sweetness from the vineyard. That's what they mean, the grape sweetness. So there's this combination of grape sweetness that exists and also wine flavors, because the yeast was allowed to create those wine flavors, but before it finished doing its job, the natural sugars are still there, so you still have those flavors from the kind of the naturally sweet juice. So it's a very interesting thing. And then in something like this, and that, by the way, that winemaking technique became famous around the world later wines were made like this about 400 years earlier than they were anywhere else in the world. So it's very interesting, about close to 400 years before they were brought, and that technology was brought by the British actually up to Portugal, and we'll talk about that later when we taste one of the others. But it's pretty cool because again, you wouldn't really do any of these things. And by the way, they made wine like this before they had any idea what was going on, because they hadn't discovered what yeast was. Yeah. So that's the other thing that's fascinating, I think, for a lot of people. I mean, Louis Pasteur was the person who figured out what yeast was and that yeast eats sugar. And that was much, much later after all this stuff was going on. So sweet wine is such a cool thing. It's so special. And I'm so thankful to be here tonight to get to taste all these wonderful things. So anyway.
Well, and a lot of this was just out of necessity. How did you keep the wine from going bad, taking it from point A to point B? And by adding the brandy spirit, it kept the wine from going bad. And it wasn't about retaining the sweetness so much. It was about making it taste good. And they gradually refined the process, but this wine was kind of 500 years old before they even really figured out the math. So this was just something that they did, and it's a classic. On a wine exam, it might ask you about naming off some wines that are fortified. This is one of them. This is one of the great wines of the dessert wine world, and it's kind of one of the most forgotten. It's really hard to find grape banyuls. I have 2 of them on our website. This is the more premium version of the banyuls. I have another one that's very nice, but it's not a Grand Cru. And but what's great about this bottle is you open it up, and 6 months from now you can come back to it, and it's going to be identical. There's going to be no diminishing returns from opening this bottle. So open it, drink some, go skiing, come back to your cabin next Christmas, and it'll still be good. This wine will be a wonderful investment. You can drink it an ounce a month, and there's no way to lose money here. It's just it's kind of a bulletproof wine, and if it's cold and you have a little bit of banyuls, it just warms the soul. So it's a perfect wine for the season, and you can find enough reasons to drink a little banyuls. And
Ian, I should tell you that this one that I'm drinking from is from the bottle that I opened with you when we selected this for you. Wow. So that's how long this one's been open, which is a long time. So you're absolutely right. They do last a long time, and they're pretty fun. So
that's cool. And it's one of those wines that you could just have on the back bar and offer people a selection of dessert wines that are open and just right there, no problem. And it doesn't take a lot of this wine to create a lot of happiness. So I hope you enjoyed the banyuls. Something fun, something special. That one's awesome, John. I really love it. We're gonna need some more, by the way, John.
Oh, good. we have a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Well, we're gonna need to get some more. And that's what's awesome too, is once we put these wines on the website, to see what happens. Sometimes we put some real flyers out there on the website, just like, no one's ever heard of that grape or that place. Let's see if the wine's great. Let's see what happens. And sometimes it moves and sometimes it doesn't. I've actually sold quite a bit of this wine before this program was even announced. So it's only been on the website for about a month and a half. So it was immediately a good target. And that's, I just think, because there's hardly anybody that carries a Banyuls out there, and especially a good one. So I want to crush this dessert wine category, like I said. And if any of you have a great dessert wine ever that you just really love, let me know about it, and I'll try to seek it out, because I want to carry a really great list. All right, we're moving into wine number 3. And this is a wine that I've had my eye on for a while. It's called Reef Salt, and this is it has a lot in common with Banyuls that we just had because it's right down the street, but a little different area, a little different grape variety. And probably when I was pretty young, my father came home with a bottle of wine that had vintage like 1898 on it, and I thought it was the coolest bottle I've ever seen. All it had on the bottle was RS or something like that for Reef Salt, and in 1898, and I didn't really know what it was until I shared it with had the bottle, and I showed it to some folks, and I was told that, oh, that's probably a bottle of Reef Salt from 1998. And these wines age for an eternity, and they actually do release wines from Reef Salt that are quite old as well. It's a terrible business model because these wines take so long. A lot of people like to buy them when they're 30, 40, 50 years of age, and imagine having to make something and hold it in inventory for 30, 40, or 50 years. So that's why a lot of these great producers down in these areas are pretty small, and probably aren't necessarily the wealthiest people in the wine industry, but they probably have some amazing inventory. And we're going to open up the slideshow and just take a look and make sure everybody sees what we're talking about. The wine that we're tasting today is 2008 Reef Salt Ombre. Is that how you pronounce that, John? Or amber? It's
like amber, and that denotes the color. So the big difference right off, obviously the color is. So the last one was made with black grapes, Grenache. This one is made with white grapes, and this one is made from a cousin of the other one. It's mostly a Grenache Blanc. So this region, it's Grenache Blanc. They also use Grenache Gris, which is gray or whatever. And there's another very famous wine called that's you may have heard of because it was trendy a few years ago. From Italy, they call it Moscato, but in this part of the world, they call it Muscat. And there are a couple of different types of Muscat that are grown. They're both permitted here. And they're both Muscat is one of the great ancient wine grapes, from Greece originally, from Alexandria, they used to call it Muscat of Alexandria. But anyway, in this region, they grow lots of those white grapes. They make the wine in a very similar way to the other one, where they stop the fermentation. So it's made just like Ian said, in the same basic way, except and then they let it oxidize. So that's why, and it's named for that color. So it's got that amber color, this particular one, and this one is it's still a very sweet wine, but it's interesting. It's not as multi-layered as the last one. It's approachable in a different kind of a way, and it's a little bit lighter in its overall body probably than the last wine, but they still, I think, both have that same kind of balance that we're kind of looking for. Also very old vines. The youngest vines that go into making this wine are about 60 years old. So that's right about in most winemaking regions of the world, that's about the time when they'd be grubbing up the vines and putting something else in. Actually, they probably would have done it about 20 years before that. And mostly a commercial crop in a commercial big money winery would start to grub up the vines at about 35 to 40 years old. Here, they're just sort of coming into their own at that age. And that's why they keep them around for much longer.
And all these vines are just grown, like a lot of them are like bushes. They're unattended to. They don't have, there's no trellising system. They're not watered. There's no watering allowed. These are just kind of raw vines growing on this really rocky terraces, and you get that almost smell of saltiness in the air here. Here's a little vineyard. And, it's kind of random where the vineyards are, and probably, demand for this wine isn't exactly off the charts. So they had to be pretty selective about which sites are the best here. And they probably had the whole damn place planted at one point, but certain spots were better than others, and the demand filled the bill. Look at that state-of-the-art stone cave. It really probably shows you a little bit too about budget that's involved here. Hand harvesting. John, how ripe are we? Are both the how ripe do you think these grapes are getting for the Banyuls and or the Reef Salt? Are we pushing?
They're getting pretty. Sorry.
Is this like late harvest?
Yeah, these would be later harvest, and it's pretty hot here, so they have to there's actually a very small window. What happens in a vineyard is that the grape itself starts out really, really high in acid, and the acid kind of goes down over the course of the summer, and the sugars come up over the course of the summer. And there's a spot where that balance that Ian was talking about kind of crosses, and that's where they want it. But in this case, they have to. They're still hoping that they can get that acid when they get lots and lots of sugar. So it's a very, very delicate balance to get this just right. But again, and then by the way, the spirit is very, very high octane stuff that they use. So that's one of the reasons why what they'll do is they'll pick it at such a place where the natural sugar the natural yeast fermentation is getting it up to about, I don't know, it depends on the wine and it depends on the house style and everything, but it's going to get around 6% alcohol or so, and then they shock it. So they
shuts down any other fermentation, leaves all
right.
the natural sugars.
So these are pretty high octane wines. They're usually about 14. This one is 16. This one's 16% alcohol. The last one was probably 17 or 18%, 18.5% alcohol on the Grand Cru. So these are not shy wines. They're not for timid folks. They're very, very serious wines that kind of pack a punch.
And you could argue you probably could taste this one in front of the Banyuls, but when I tasted the Banyuls, opening up the bottle, really had kind of a little bit more subtle sweetness than this wine does. This one kind of shows off a little bit more candied fruit, especially kind of that sugar-coated orange peels, those little desserty, gelatinous oranges covered in sugar. That's what I smell here. Also that saltiness, that fresh sea air that's blowing through this place, probably ravaging these hills, and all that dried nuttiness too that's described here. A kind of a sherry type of flavor with the Christmas cake aromas. I think it's pretty spot on type of description. Christmas cake aromas, dried fruits, orange peels, figs, dates, and walnuts. But really a cool wine. What I like about Reef Salt too, if someone's gonna say celebrate a special birth year and they're mature in years, maybe they're 75, 80 years old, and you want to find them a great bottle of wine, find a vintage Reef Salt from back in 1930 something. Go and you can do that, and they're not going to kill you like a great vintage Bordeaux or something like that. They, a great vintage reef salt you could get for $100.50, $200.50 from something that's 80 years old or thereabouts. This one's got a nice price on it. The 2008, it's less than $30. And again, it's another one of those wines you can open and just come back to. I've had my reef salt open for at least 6 months since we moved into this new office space. So, and it's drinking great. And I love pairing it again with salted caramel, candied orange peels, any type of a dried fruit platter, or chocolate dipped dried fruit would go great. Cheese. I love
If some monster brings fruitcake for Christmas to your house, and you don't know what to do with it, just give them some of this with it. It'll be great. So
yeah, I was actually setting off on a ambitious track. I had a lot of ideas for December, and one of them was to try to make an actual delicious Christmas cake. I failed. It was neither delicious, nor was it really in the cake category. Kind of ended up in the candy, like hard candy category. It was so damn hard I couldn't even cut it. It broke when I used a knife on it. So my recipe wasn't very good, perhaps, but I think it was more my inexperience.
We had really good fruitcake at my house.
Did someone send it from a prominent fruitcake company, or was this?
No, it was homemade. So yeah, I didn't do it. Not me. Not bragging.
Maybe you could share the recipe so I could give it a gander and learn something.
Yeah, but it was fantastic. So it can be done.
My family has no Christmas cake recipe to share for generations.
Yeah, I think maybe this wasn't our family recipe, but my grandmother always made it, so I was used to it, and so I actually requested it. So yeah, I guess I'm the crazy one that wants the fruitcake.
All right, well, you found something good.
I love fruitcake.
Cool.
And my mom used to marinate it and stuff,
Yeah. I've had them with like maraschino cherries and figs and dried plums and all kinds of stuff in it, and they can be pretty interesting. All right, well, now we'll go to wine number 4. I think we're going a little long, John, so we got to be a little careful here. But we're in Portugal for a moment, just to talk about Portugal, because Portugal is kind of a crazy place. It's got this amazing coastline. There's this mountain range that kind of keeps it locked away from Spain. And then somehow the Portuguese were able to keep these island properties that are very far away from Portugal. And I always said, I bet you back in the 1400s, 1500s, there was probably no one meaner than the Portuguese. So that's how they kept these locations. And Madeira is an island. It is one of the craziest places to try to visit, with I think the most dangerous airport in the world, because it's sitting on top of a perch, and the runway is really short and planes go off the edge. But we're talking about the island of Madeira. And Madeira gave birth to a wine, and the whole purpose for this wine was to be kind of bulletproof, so that the sailing vessels could take their wine into the spice market and trade markets. And how we do that, and it kind of developed by them putting some wine on the bow of a ship in a barrel and watching it go bad. And bad meaning it Madeirized. It Madeirized on the ship, oxidized and tossed and turned and turned in the heat of the sun, and then they tasted the wine. They're like, you know what? It's actually pretty damn good. And then they went back to Madeira and say, how do we do more of this? And they created a cooking technique to simulate the sun exposure, the heating of the wine. It's called an estufagem. And they created this process of cooking the wine to Madeirize it. And here we are taking a look at the guys that run Blandy's, family operated, pretty significant producer. But this is a look at the winemaking process: destemming, fermentation, press. Then they fortify the wine. They put it in the heating thing, or they put it out in the sun, one of the two. And this sun process takes a long time, and it's pretty expensive. So they really started making most Madeira in a more manufactured process through the estufagem. There are still some wines that go through the slower sun-baked process. So you can do a little research and find out which one is which. But after they cook the wine, they put it in barrel for a period of time and then bottle it. And that's what we're looking at here is a 15-year Malmsey. Malmsey being the grape selection. And they do make Madeira from a number of different grapes in a number of different styles, from dry to sweet. The Madeira industry was quite interesting because it became such a popular drink at some point that the big companies went and tried to really milk it and turned a lot of the wine in Madeira into kind of overly manufactured dessert wine that fell out of fashion. Back in the 1940s, 1950s, Madeira, even the cheap stuff, was pretty popular, but literally they just kind of manufactured cheap Madeira to a point where it overtook the popularity of the good Madeira, and people started thinking Madeira is basically cooking wine. And so the good Madeira got kind of ignored, especially as these corporations came in and made this kind of large batch stuff. And flash forward to 2022, and the world's kind of like, hey, I had some really good Madeira lately, let's try to get some. And now it's getting pretty expensive. So as what we're seeing in this package here is a 500 ml, because A, it doesn't take a lot of Madeira to make you happy. B, it's expensive to make a wine that's 15 or so years of age. And so they keep it as cost effective as possible by shrinking that bottle size. And once you open a bottle of Madeira, it never goes bad. It is one of the more distinctive dessert wines in the world. As you smell it, you get this really intense perfume, and I think it can shock some people at first. If you can get over that hump, you'll be like, damn, that's good. And it really does, I think just smelling it makes me kind of go crazy here. Like I'm talking about it, and my mouth is just watering like crazy, because there's no wine in the world with higher acidity than Madeira. It is off the charts in total acidity, and that's what's making your mouth go crazy. Your saliva gland is just going nuts, and so they have a good amount of residual sugar to offset that, and they do that with in the winemaking process. John, do you have anything you want to add about our Madeira discussion? This is not one you brought us, but
no, but I love Madeira, and I so glad that you have one here. And I love it because of that distinctive acidity and that sort of freshness. But there's always this kind of green herb thing that I really love in Madeira. I don't have this one in front of me, but when I first started taking my various wine tests, I could always pick out the Madeira because of the acid, and it was always very pleasing. It's got a great history with America because this was very, very important. The oldest wine club in the United States is a Madeira wine club. It's in Virginia, and it was started by Thomas Jefferson was a massive Madeira fan, and he had Madeira here all the time. And there are a lot of people who believe that they probably toasted the signing of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence with Madeira. So it's got a great history. As Ian said, it probably tasted better by the time it got to England, and then at one point, and then eventually all the way over through the Indies and into the southeastern United States. It probably tasted better after all that abuse. The wine is remarkable, and I've always loved them. There are a bunch of different ones, and I say try them all. Like Ian said, they're great. Lots of different ages, lots of different grape varieties. They generally tell you the grape variety on the label. So wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I'll refer to our website real quick just to, let's see, I'm going to go to dessert wine. Oh, let me share with you what I'm doing. All right, so in here I go to dessert wines and fortifieds, and you can see I've started to take some positions on some things. I've got some 2003, some 81, some 77, and kind of thinking about birth year stuff. I can go back in time. I'm looking for my older stuff. There's a 1960, that's my birth year. That was a good excuse for me to stock up on some Bual. 1968. It does get a little pricey now. Once you start getting into the older stuff. But I have a bottle of 1968 Bual that I opened 5 years ago. I take a glass out of it every year for my birthday. And now it's got about 1/3 of a bottle left or less. Doesn't change a bit from year to year, just like me. Here's some 98, some 10-year. So when they do 10-year, it's kind of a style, 10-year style. And here's the larger production called Rainwater. This is really what you could either fault the producers for making a wine like Rainwater. It's kind of a blend, if you will, that's basic Madeira. It's delicious. It's $18, and it's just a simple way to have a really good glass of dessert wine from Madeira available. But yeah, I've got a growing selection of Madeira, and there are a whole bunch of grape varieties I don't yet have. My preference is either Malmsey or Bual, but I like all of them. And there are some really dry styles in the Madeira category as well. And sometime later this year, we'll do just a Madeira presentation, and I'll get different grapes, different sweetness levels, and from different producers, and we'll put it together. But that'll take a little time. Let's move into wine number 5, our final victim. We're talking about port wine, and I have quite a few different ports. I will always have quite a few different ports. This is a production of 10-year Tawny, which requires just a little bit of explaining. The producer is Wares, They've been making port wine since the 1600s. Portugal and the port wine industry was the first delineated wine zone in the wine world. The King of Portugal said, if you're going to make port, it's got to be made in Oporto, and he geographically put a line around where that mattered, and that set the stage for the world, because no one else in the wine world had ever done that before. Port wine is a fortified wine. It was brought down by boats into the town, aged in wood. There's two styles of port. There's ruby port, that's about 2.5 years in the barrel, and then bottle aged or bottle conditioned. And then there's Tawny Port, or wood aged ports, and there's a couple different ones. My favorite's called Colheita, and those could be a single vintage tawny, basically, where they aged the wine in wood for 20 years from 2002, 1980. I think Ms. Oppenheimer, I think you wanted some more of the O2 Colheita, if I remember correct.
That was fabulous. And we have one bottle left, and we're afraid to open it because that will be the last bottles.
Yeah. And
thank you for finding that. It was awesome.
Sure. And I'll find some more. But with the shipping container thing, not a lot of people are bringing in Colheita at this time. So it's not been an easy find, but it will be there. The deal we had was pretty extreme, but we will find some other great Colheita, and it's one of my favorite things to recommend. In the same category is this 10-year tawny. Now, when they call it Tawny Port, they have 10, 20, 30, or 40-year tawnies, and they are blends. They're not just 10 years old and bottle it. They'll take a little 5, a little 15, they'll blend it together, and they'll create a style that tastes like it's 10 years old. That's how they make these wines. So they submit the actual wine to the government to make sure that the government approves it as being a good representation of 10-year tawny. So here, Wares does a pretty nice job in making something that has the typicity of the Portuguese grape varieties. I mean, they make it mostly with grapes like Touriga Nacional and Tinto Ruiz, grapes that might be called Tempranillo in other places, and other grape varieties. But these are just rugged hills that are terraced and super labor intensive, and they plant these grape varieties, and they have to be really thick skins to survive the heat of Portugal. In fact, the skins are so thick and the grape varieties are so durable that they're now talking about planting these grape varieties, these Portuguese grape varieties, in places like Bordeaux to offset global warming, because they survive in the heat of the Douro. They could survive in a warmer growing area. So we'll probably hear more about these Portuguese grape varieties in years to come. But the port industry used to be huge, and it's gotten a lot smaller, and a lot of port producers have now shifted to dry red wine instead of making the fortifieds that we're tasting today. Wares is still one of the big companies, but there's fewer and fewer port houses every year. Consolidation has left us with about 3 big port producing companies that are competing for market share, and all they do is just buy other port houses to increase the share of their wine in the marketplace. They might even buy a port house and take all of their tawny port that's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years old over to another port house and add it to their supply, because these old aged vintage tawnies are really expensive to make, and they take a long time, and there's not enough supply, so they just buy another port house to get to raid their supply. That has been happening for the past 20 plus years, and that's how some wines kind of come into the marketplace, because the brand's going to disappear, and we could get a good wine for not a lot of money, because they're going to raid their supply, their current supply, and sell off the old supply. So here, Wares is one of the stronger brands with a very big import company and a worldwide distribution sales force. The style is generous. It's a red wine that's 10 years old, that's oxidized. Once you open a bottle of Tawny Port, it can actually spoil a little bit faster than, say, the Malmsey or some of the other fortifieds. 10-year tawnies, I'd say once you open them, probably should drink them within a year, maybe 6 months. You could even tell me that it's sooner than that. The other ones that we were talking about, they don't change forever. These are only slightly oxidized and will diminish after probably 30-60 days. You start seeing a little bit of diminishing on the edge, but they are oxidized for 10 years, and they've been also evaporating for 10 years. So you've got this beautiful concentration. Again, that creme brulee, you got a little higher alcohol. You're talking about 20 parts of alcohol, so 20% alcohol. And they do the same thing as some of the other wine categories that we had before. They allow for some fermentation before they add the brandy spirit. About 15 years ago, the Portuguese government changed the rules and allowed the port companies to actually manufacture their own brandy spirit, and therefore that actually improved the quality of the brandy spirit that's going in to the product, and it's starting to elevate the quality of the even the base wines have gotten better in the port wine category. But the production of port is on the decline. Restaurants buy like one bottle at a time. It's something that's distributed all over the place, but no one's buying 15 cases of port wine, except for me. I bought 15 cases of this one because I got a great deal. And so I'll have this available at one of the best prices you'll ever see for a while. It was a great opportunity for us to be able to jump on something, to be able to have a nice low-cost 10-year tawny. And so I bought a good amount of it, and we'll see how long that lasts. But I love Tawny Port. It's my preference. I like to keep it in the refrigerator and just pull out a glass whenever you want over the next year. And this is a 500 ml, and so that's a nice little investment. Really good also during the summer, in the heat of the summer. A little rocks glass, a little tonic, a little tawny, and a sprig of mint is one of the best, most refreshing drinks you can make over the summer. It's kind of a tawny and tonic, and it's a delicious little summer cocktail. And what questions might you have about our wines tonight, or anything that we did not address, or maybe we skipped over? I see a question in the chat box. Yes, the Banyuls is available on the website for purchase. If you go to Zoom Into Wine page, you can click right on the wines that are on tonight's event, and it'll take you straight to the wine, so you don't have to look for it. Or up in the upper right-hand corner of the Merchant of Wine website, there's a little Q, and that opens up a search box, and you can just put in the word Banyuls or Madeira and find all the different Banyuls or all the different Madeiras that we have. It's a great way to use the Merchant of Wine website. The Shopify system that we're on searches pretty well, unless we screwed it up, which we do once in a while, and sometimes we we spell the word wrong, or we forget to add all the descriptors correctly, and we discover those when 6 months later the wine's still sitting there and we haven't sold anything. I say, why is that? What's going on with that? Let's look at it in the website, see what's happening. I see a question. Pierre. I can't hear Pierre. What is he saying?
Well, while Pierre tries to figure out how to unmute himself,
Yeah.
quick question. Somebody told me a few years ago that the ultimate wine to drink with chocolate is Banuels. Would you agree with that, or what's your assessment?
Oh, well, that is the classic pairing, for sure. Is Banyuls and chocolate. I think it depends on the chocolate, though. So, you can have different types of wines with chocolate. I like dry red wine with chocolate myself. I love having a Zinfandel or Cabernet or a lot of different wines, depending on how dry the chocolate is. But a sweeter chocolate dessert or a sweeter piece of chocolate, raisinets, something like that, and a Banyuls. That's pretty damn tasty.
Yeah, we just paired it with a chocolate raspberry on graham crackers.
Actually,
Nice. That's interesting.
because that's what's available up here.
Fantastic. And now
it's actually really good.
you're going to go skiing tomorrow, right?
Yes, we ski today too.
Oh, all right. You got out. Cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Congratulations. I bet.
Yeah, we earned our port.
That's cool. Well, thanks for sharing it with the family. Pierre, did you get unmuted and can we hear you?
I think it's a microphone issue here. I think we're talking about the doing a nice job of first question was more
Ooh, you're going to have to yell at me a little bit. Favorite pairing with each of the wines? I'll tell you, cheese is my universal answer for dessert wine. And probably for the Sauterne, I would go to a blue cheese with the Sauterne. I love Roquefort and Sauterne. It's a classic pairing. I could go with the Banyuls. I would probably lean on that chocolate thing, but I have recently had this great cheddar that's covered in cacao. Have you seen that? Is it? Gosh, I can't remember the name of it. It might be from Utah, actually. It's covered with cocoa beans. They crushed cocoa beans. Not a sweet chocolate. It's a dry chocolate covering of cheddar cheese. I think it might be called Beehive. I'm gonna punt on that one, but you can Google search chocolate covered cheddar, and I bet it turns up. And that could be a very interesting pairing for the Banyuls. We'll go to the Reef Salt. John, what would you pair with the Reef Salt? Maybe a.
I like dried fruit with Reef
yeah.
Salt, yeah, and dried fruit and nuts are pretty classic. And then I also like cheese with it. And for most of these, I agree with you. I like blue vein cheeses. So Roquefort or Stilton or even Gorgonzola is even great with it. That's pretty readily available these days. So it's hard to find a really great Stilton or Roquefort, but you can usually find a pretty tasty Gorgonzola. Those are all great with it. And like I said, nuts and dried fruit, or cooked fruit like fruitcake we talked about. I think that would be great with it.
Yeah, and I was just thinking too, crepes, or even like a bananas Foster could be kind of an interesting option for something like the Reef Salt or the Tawny Port. Little candied fruit like that. But I love a good reason to have a crepe. That'd be a good choice.
what about like a nice kind of table with a little bit of fat to it? I think for some reason these are, especially this one.
I feel like your microphone's got like a sock on top of it because I can't. I can almost hear Pierre.
Can you hear us now? Can you hear us now?
When you say it like that, yes. Because
we were talking about potentially some, nice, juice pate or something that would attract to it, some of these wines, like even the Bagnoles.
Yeah.
Some pate. I don't know if that would be appropriate or not.
I know the Sauterne and pate is what you were saying. Could be a great choice. Foie gras and Sauterne is a classic pairing, obviously, and legal again here in California, by the way. But I wonder which. I think it would kind of come down to the pate itself, how it was made, and what type of prevalent flavors we'd have. Something real creamy. Pate. I think Sauterne might be where I would go with that choice, but reef salt could be an interesting option. I've never done that before. That would be something I would maybe venture out and try. The Madeira, a little more challenging on the pairing for Madeira, unless, John, you have something in mind. You didn't even try the 15-year Malmsey, but is there a classic?
Well, the thing is, it's either, sometimes it's really floral and then it has that sort of green herb thing. It depends on but Malmseys can be very aromatic. And I like I said, unfortunately I don't have that one, but yeah. But then the acid, actually, I think you could still do something. I do like a really old cheddar, like that I think something would be really great with it. You can do again, I might do some dried nuts with the Madeira, but you can also the challenge with I think chocolate I wouldn't do with a Malmsey. For me, I probably wouldn't do something like that, but that's sort of, I don't know. That's just me, I guess.
Put chocolate on top of your nuts. That could be good. Good way to do that.
Yeah, but you could actually do some interesting kind of tropical fruit sort of pies with it. Like some kind of a kiwi and chocolate kind of thing. I think it's more versatile than we think, but I don't think that some of those really pretty high tone kinds of things would go with the chocolate, because they would just get covered up. I think you'd need to find something that had a little bit of parity and a little bit of balance with it. Yeah. The thing is, these wines, they can be very, very powerful, but there's a lot of nuance in them as well, and you want to make sure that you allow that to shine. I think so.
Sure. Yeah, I'm stressed to think of a perfect pairing for the Malmsey. It just pairs well with sitting around and drinking it all night long with your friends. Great conversation is the perfect pairing for that one. And then the Tawny Port, I love that with salted caramel. That's one of my favorite all-time pairings, is just to go with Tawny Port or Colheita with a salted caramel. There's just something really natural there. Certainly, nut pies and that, something like a pecan pie or something like that would be pretty nice there. Apple pie actually works out really well with Tawny Port as well. And so those are fun pairing options for your dessert wines. But I back to what we said when we started. I think if we have to put the bar too high to have a dessert wine, then you don't have a dessert wine, and that's part of the problem, because a lot of people cut out the dessert. So why have a dessert wine? Well, don't have dessert and just have dessert wine. I think that's the right way to go, and it'll be a little bit more rewarding and a little more prevalent if we thought of it that way. So that's what I'm pushing, is have that for your dessert. I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. We're we kicked off 2022 with a sweet session here. And I really appreciate your support and joining us tonight. I'm sorry we went a little bit long. We had a lot to talk about, but we don't have a hard out, so we just kind of talk until we're done. But for those of you that stayed up a little later than you wanted to, appreciate your flexibility, and we'll be back. We've got a whole bunch of Zoom into wine sessions coming next week. We're looking at Bordeaux, and in particular values in Bordeaux. And in fact, if you join us, our flight has 5 different Bordeaux's. It's a low cost for the tasting flight, or you could buy the full bottles for $100 and get all 5 wines. And there's some really nice selections. Most of them are 15 and 16 in vintage, and they really kind of all over deliver. And so we're going to talk about that and what's happening in the Bordeaux market, and how 15s and 16s are quickly disappearing, but they're being replaced by some pretty good 18s, and 2019s are on their way. So I hope you guys will join us in the near term. Stars of California Wine is our big focus event this month. And we've got a really fun, interesting set of wineries. My family, we're Zinfandel producers. We're participating with Beekeeper, but there's also another couple of brands, one being a Sonoma brand that's got a Zinfandel blend that they're going to be showing off with Zinfandel and Tempranillo and other grape varieties. And then a Napa producer that's Zinfandel based with Cabernet and Cab Franc. And so we'll have quite a bit of Zinfandel discussion that night, but some real great classic Napa Valley Cab from one of the top producers in the Napa Valley, Chimney Rock, will be joining us. And it's an all red wine Stars of California version this time. So starting off with some great Santa Barbara Pinot, going to Paso for some Cinsault, and then we'll finish up with 3 different Zinfandel based wines. And then Chimney Rock will be our lead story with a really beautiful $100+ bottle of Cabernet. So that's our Stars of California Wine, and it'll be really a fun discussion. And that's our January event. The full calendar of Stars events will be published here pretty quickly, so you can plan forward. But we have got some real big, ambitious ideas for this year. So thanks for joining us. Join our Zoom Into Wine membership if you haven't already, and get that $100 bottle of wine. That offer expires when we run out of wine or by the end of the month, whichever comes first. But we appreciate all your support, folks. Have a good night. Enjoy the skiing. Be careful. No injuries, please. And,
thank you.
John, thanks
Bye.
so much for all your help.
Thanks
buddy.
very much.
You're awesome.
Thank you.
You're always there to help me in the pinch. So thanks so much, buddy.
Thank you very much. Take care. Have a great night, everyone.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.